Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Almassian. The other day, I posted about the coup in Niger, in Africa, and explained the root causes for the popularity of the military takeover in a few African countries. One of which is, of course, the French neocolonialism in 14 African countries, where France exerts its hegemony through two main means. One, French companies have monopoly and they exploit the natural resources such as gold, minerals, diamond, and uranium, and also lithium in different African countries. And two, via printing the CFA franc, or what is called franc of the French colonies in Africa, which is used in 8 West African countries and 6 Central African countries. So in total 14 African countries. In West African countries, they're used in Benin, Burkina Faso, Guinea-Bissau, Ivory Coast, Mali, Niger, Senegal, and Togo. And in Central African countries, it is used by Cameroon, Central African Republic, Chad, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, and Congo. These 14 countries together, they make up around 195 million people and 103.3 billion GDP per year. This is the statistics from 2021. So it's a huge, I would say, money located in this area. Now you remember the video I made on Ibrahim Traore, and I said the video is not for those who have colonized minds and those who would sell their mothers to please the colonizer and the oppressor. One of these colonized minds left a comment the other day on Facebook on the post that I was talking about, the coup in Niger. And he says, I quote, I'm quoting him, just first see the wordings and where is this guy is going to. He says, he starts his comment with, quote, monetary cooperation between France and African countries is very beneficial for these countries because France is committed to fixing the exchange rate of the franc against the euro. First of all, cooperation happens between both sides who have mutual benefit from it. Of course, Africans do want to have cooperation and cooperative relationship with France if it's of mutual benefit. Is Africa benefiting from it? It is getting the fraction of these benefits. Most of the benefits are for France. And I'm going to come back to that later, guys. Just so stay tuned for that because I'm going to explain to you exactly how France is getting most of the benefits and giving fraction of the benefits to these African countries. He continues his comment again. I quote, and as soon as fixing the exchange rate of the franc against, as soon as the franc exchange rate is fixed in countries with worn out economies and in which there is great corruption on the part of the local authorities, this alone is a great benefit for the countries in terms of steadfastness of their economies against major economic shocks, which allows curbing inflation through the stability of the currency. Now, the wording, as I mentioned first at the beginning, there is no cooperation. There is one side imposing its will on the African countries, and most of the benefits is being harvested by France as an imperial power and as a colonizer of 14 African countries. And as I mentioned, I'm going to explain that just in a few minutes from now. And the second thing is always the people from Middle East or Africa, those who come to Europe and they live here and they all of a sudden they like speak about the corruption in their own countries. There is a widespread corruption in our countries. That is true. However, there is also other factors. Just focusing on one factor and say the corruption, the local corruption, is the only reason for any sort of misery in these countries. This is disingenuous because there is also so many other factors. For example, war is a huge factor. So you have to see who initiates wars, and you have to see who's waging regime change wars, who is initiating coup d'etats, who is imposing sanctions, and who is coming and imposing a monopoly and economic monopoly over certain sectors such as oil, gas, uranium, minerals, gold, and diamond and lithium. Right? Those are rich resources, and there are so many countries from the, let's say, imperialist countries coming and colonizing Africa and the Middle East. So not speaking about these means, in my opinion, And by the way, this guy was a Syrian anti-Assad activist. He lives in Belgium. And this proves my point, my initial argument, and that is a considerable number of people from Syria, Middle East in general, and Africans, which Ukraine flag in their bios on Twitter, unfortunately. These people see the sunshine from the butthole of the colonizer and the oppressor. They see everything beautiful this side and everything ugly on this side. In fact, they're so submissive and they suffer from this inferiority complex to the extent that even the colonizer and the oppressor doesn't respect them and sees them as used shoes to wear them a few times and then toss them. This is the truth of the matter. They see them as a lemon, they squeeze them, and then throw them away. And this happened so many times when the Syrians, 1 million Syrian refugees came to Germany. If you want to work in the public field and you can form two sentences and you say you're anti Assad, you become famous. They write books about you. You are invited to conferences, you're invited to events, you're given prizes, awards, and everything. But then, after a few years, when they are done using you, because at the beginning they needed to show the German people that we have to receive all the refugees and all of them are nice and good and everything. Of course, there are so many good people, but also there are bad people, right? But they used only these people to give this image about the newcomers to Germany. But now, once they politicized the issue, they used them, they threw them away. Where are they now? They don't even have now TV programs that they used to have in the past. Nobody is writing books about them. Nobody is inviting them to get awards. This was just temporary thing. So even the people who use them, they don't respect them. They know that these are just tools, and then yalla, they kick them away. They toss them. Now, let's deconstruct these allegations that this guy made on my Facebook account. And I'm not, this is not a personal discussion, guys. This is for educational purposes. Today, our friend and colleague, Thomas Fazi, he was a guest on Syriana Analysis in the past few weeks ago. He published a brilliant article on. Unheard. The title of the article goes Niger and the Collapse of France's Empire. First, there was Mali, then came Burkina Faso. Today, in the epic saga that is the anti Western revolt sweeping across the Sahel, it is the turn of Niger to play the protagonist, the third country to suffer a coup in just 3 years. In each of these coups, the military officers involved cited the same reasons for seizing power: mounting concerns about a surge in terrorism and chronic social and economic underdevelopment. Despite being one of the world's richest regions in terms of natural resources, including oil, gold, and uranium, the Sahel is also one of the poorest financially. Niger is a striking example. It is one of the world's leading exporters of uranium, yet consistently ranks toward the bottom of the Human Development Index. In the eyes of these countries, new leaders and their supporters, much of in the eyes of these countries, in the eyes of these countries, new leaders and their supporters, much of the responsibility for this lies with one villain in particular: France. They are, after all former French colonies, part of what used to be known as Francafrique. And more than any other imperial power, France has continued to exercise a huge influence over its former outposts, replacing outright colonial rule with more subtle forms of neocolonial control, first and foremost with currency. Before Africa's decolonization in the 50s and 60s, it was common among Western powers to impose forms of monetary subservience on their respective colonies. The latter were generally forced to use currencies issued and controlled by the imperial centers to ensure the European countries' economic control and financial benefit. France was no exception. Rather, what set France apart from other imperial powers was the fact that its monetary empire survived decolonization. While most African countries, upon becoming independent, adopted national currencies, France managed to cajole most of its former outposts in Central and Western Africa into maintaining the colonial currency, the CFA franc. The CFA franc, as a result, continues to be used by 14 African countries, mostly former French colonies throughout Central and Western Africa, including Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Together, they form the so called Franc Zone, with France still playing a central role. Consider Niger. The country is France's biggest source of uranium, providing around 20% of its supply, which is needed to fuel the nuclear plant, which provide roughly 70% of the country's electricity. Yet only one in seven Nigerians and just 4% of rural residents have access to modern electricity services, while more than 40% of the population live in extreme poverty. Just as strikingly, 85% of the company that operates Niger's uranium industry is owned by France's Atomic Energy Commission and two French companies. Only 50%, 15% is owned by Niger's government. The CFA system and the lack of monetary and economic sovereignty it entails is central to this systematic plundering of resources. In Niger and elsewhere in the Sahel, of the 10 countries with the world's lowest human development index, 5 are part of the franc zone, including the 3 that have experienced recent coups. Nor is France's control over the Franc zone limited to economic tools. Niger is also France's main Sahelian military base, hosting around 1,500 French soldiers. To further complicate matters, the country is also home to around 1,000 US soldiers, one of the largest contingents of American troops on the African continent, operating under the umbrella of the United States Africa Command, AFRICOM. For both France and the US, the purported objective is to fight Islamic terrorism. The reality, however, is that despite this massive foreign military presence, security in Niger and other countries has deteriorated over the years, as have their economic prospects. Perhaps we shouldn't be surprised then that Africa's newest military juntas have singled out France as the main target of their ire. In Mali, the current military leader Assimi Goïta expelled the French army, cut diplomatic ties, and even banned French as an official language. In Burkina Faso, the young revolutionary leader Ibrahim Traoré also expelled French troops and banned several exports. While the first stage of this process was about obtaining political independence from the West, this latest stage is about obtaining economic sovereignty and independence. But what does this mean for Niger? For now, the country appears to be moving in the same direction as Mali and Burkina Faso, while the new government has stopped short, for now, of telling foreign troops to leave the country. It has revoked a raft of military cooperation agreement with France, closed the country's airspace, effectively bringing to a halt US drone operations, and announced it is suspending the export of uranium to France. In response, thousands of people have taken to the streets to show their support, burning French flags and even attacking the French embassy. The Economic Community of West African Countries, or States ECOWAS, a political and economic union of 15 countries located in West Africa, which has the support of the West, immediately placed sanctions on Niger, suspending all commercial and financial transactions between Niger and ECOWAS countries, and even more ominously, freezing Niger's assets deposited in the central and commercial banks of ECOWAS. The reason they can do this is precisely because ECOWAS contains the West African Economic and Monetary Union, which issues the currency used by Niger and is largely under France's control. This allows France to weaponize the CFA franc against any government that poses a problem for it within the franc zone. More worryingly, the West African bloc said it would take all measures necessary, including the use of force, if the elected government was not reinstated within a week. That deadline expired on Sunday, and no action was taken, but the threat has not been retracted. They are due to meet on Thursday to decide what happens next. But this is more than just a story about France's wanting hegemony and US military presence in the region. The Nigerian coup also threatens a $13 billion project to build a gas pipeline connecting gas fields in Nigeria to Europe, which would pass straight through Niger. Following the EU's decision to wean itself off Russian gas last year, this venture is arguably more urgent than ever. It seems that Putin is playing chess with them in Africa. The Nigerian military regime, for its part, has warned that any foreign military intervention in the country would result in a massacre, while Mali and Burkina Faso have both come out in support of the new government. Any military intervention they warned in a joint statement would be tantamount to a declaration of war against Burkina Faso and Mali and could destabilize the entire region. Moreover, given Russia's strong ties with the putschist government, a Western backed attack on Niger could easily mutate into what Colin Clark has described as a regional proxy war, with Russia and the Wagner Group supporting Niger and Burkina Faso and Mali, and Western countries supporting ECOWAS. All of which feeds into fears that we are on the verge of a new scramble for Africa, with Russia, China, and the West vying for influence over this immensely resource rich young continent predicted to be the next frontier of growth. If this logic prevails, however, it will be a disaster for Africa. For as hard as it may be to fathom, Western countries, and France in particular, should accept that this anti Western trend has much less to do with recent foreign influence than with historical grievances against long running neocolonial practices. Any attempt to counter it with the same old recipe, financial blackmail and military force, will only strengthen the rebels' resolve. What do you think, guys, about this article? I find it brilliantly written. I didn't want to stop and make commentaries on it because it's self evidently describing it in a very good way. It's self evident and describing in a very good way. I will put the link in the description below if you want to read it again, guys. He's a very good author. I have hosted him previously. I wanted to host him today, but he's on vacation, unfortunately. I wanted to discuss this article with him in depth, but tomorrow I'm going to host a guest from Nicaragua, and we're going to speak about more about the developments in Africa. So definitely stay tuned. And if you're new, please subscribe and activate the ring bell so that you don't miss that interview, which I find it, I'm sure it will be very interesting for you guys as well. So this was the article and the explanation. As you can see, how the CFA franc is playing an instrumental role in France's practiced hegemony on the African continent, at least in 14 African countries, and also blackmailing them if they want to liberate themselves from this economic colonialism. Yeah, they were freed politically, but economically they are still under the submission, and they are submitted to the France first, and the Americans also have forces there. On the other hand, now Russia and China, they are competing increasingly with these countries in Africa. And when I said Putin is playing chess, this is very important for Putin because Putin wants to harm Europe as much as he can, right? Due to this proxy war in Ukraine, and because they don't want to buy gas from Russia, and they want to extend the pipeline from Africa to Europe, just like they wanted to extend the Qatari gas pipeline through Syria and Turkey to Europe. This is an energy game. So Putin, in my opinion, has shot them in the leg with this coup. If it's supported by Russia and the Wagner Group, it was a very smart geopolitical game by Putin, and I don't think that the Europeans and the Americans have expected this. And today, by the way, this Madame, what was her name? Victoria Nuland. Yesterday she was in Africa, and she was threatening the Niger government to restore the previous government or else. So we will see what will happen with that as well. But the leader of the Wagner, Brogigin, I'm always butchering his name. He posted a video about this case, which, in my opinion, explains the Russian point of view regarding this case. And probably you're interested to hear what the Wagner is doing in Africa and why do they think that they have to intervene in Niger in this case. So let's take a look together.
Да, я вам отвечу, в чем основа причин смены власти в Нигере. Основа – это экономика. Население Нигера длительное время загонялось в нищету. Например, французская компания, которая добывала уран, она продавала его по $218, а Нигеру платила по $11. Можно работать с инвесторами 50 на 50, 30 на 70, но невозможно отдавать коренным жителям страны, которые родились в этой стране, которые живут в этой стране, и которые рассчитывают на то, что недра этой стране принадлежат им, и они принадлежат им по Конституции. платить всего 5% с тех богатств, которые вы получаете. Для того, чтобы скрыть эти экономические преступления, страна насыщалась огромным количеством террористов. Это огромное количество террористов теоретически должно было контролироваться огромным количеством различных войск, которые финансировались Организацией Объединенных Наций, Евросоюза, американцами, англичанами и кем только не финансировалось. И поэтому население Нигера, которое должно было быть свободно, которое должно было быть счастливо за счет тех экономических возможностей, которые находятся на территории их страны, это население обворовывалось, и для того, чтобы оно молчало, их держали долгие десятилетия в страхе, но для того, чтобы показать, что эти воры, эти расхитители нужны на территории государства, я имею в виду западные страны, Францию, Америку и так далее, для этого туда загонялись толпы военных, которые ничего не делали и получали колоссальные бюджеты, которые также разворовывались на различных уровнях. И поэтому преобразования в Нигере, они просто были необходимы. Власть, которая была вместе с Базумом и его приспешниками, она просто крышевала, давала возможность разворовывающим народ коалиции находиться на территории Нигера. Собственно говоря, вот и все. Поэтому это борьба освободительное движение за независимость этой страны. И дай Бог им здоровья, и чтобы у них все получилось.
So this is the Russian point of view, because Wagner has a strong presence in Africa, and they represent the official Russian, I would say, military interests and economic interests there, right? And it seems increasingly that Russia is involved in different parts of the world through the Wagner and their military forces, and this poses a serious challenge to the French and the American influence. And look, the US and France and other, let's say, big countries or big economies, their economies cannot sustain without outside natural resources, minerals, gas, fuel, etc. Like Germany, they need gas from Russia, right? And now once the Russian gas has been diminished or decreased, the entire economy is suffering. And now Germany has become, I think, the fifth biggest economy. Russia has become the fourth. So the same thing applies for France. They need the lithium from Africa, they need the gold, and they need, most importantly, the uranium from Africa. And the Chinese are coming investing in the African countries, and mostly they are gaining, let's say, influence there through investments. And they are uplifting the living standards of the people. They're building infrastructure, but at the same time, they're buying influence there, right? The Russians, they have more confrontational approach now with the United States and France in the African continent, and this has been well represented now after the coups in the few different African countries, where France has, I would say, instrumental and very important interest there. But because of the Ukraine war, now the Russians are becoming bolder in their actions, and they are becoming more challenging to the Western, let's say, hegemony overall over Africa, to harm the European and Western interests, because they're harming the Russian interests through the gate of Ukraine. So they're playing, this part is playing a chess and the other part is playing. But just if you ask my humble opinion, I think the Russian side now has initiated this in Africa, and that's not, I'm saying it for as a negative or a positive thing, but usually in the past decade or two, we've seen that is the United States attacking on an attack mode, or the US-led empire is on an attack mode up until to the Ukrainian proxy conflict. And in 2014, and now Russia has initiated the attack on Ukraine, and now also in Africa. So the Russians are increasingly feeling comfortable to be on an offensive mode, diplomatically, economically, and also militarily. There's so many reasons for it. because of the Russian situation itself, domestically and externally, in the economic situation in Russia, economic level, diplomacy, security, military, etc. But also, very, very importantly, the Chinese backing. China is supporting or protecting the back of Russia in so many places, diplomatically, economically, financially, and probably also militarily. We don't know. And through the gate of Ukraine, this strategic cooperation between Russia and China has increased dramatically, into extent that the Europeans and the Americans are bulldogging against China because of this support. And they want to open new fronts, military fronts, or create security problems for China so that China can be busy with its own affairs. But just my just my prediction or my analysis, China is too big now for the United States and Europe to contain. Too big economically, security, militarily, and everything. They couldn't contain Russia. They will never be able to contain China. This is just my prediction about it. Now, the Americans are threatening. Of course, the France is threatening, but also the Americans are threatening now the African countries, and one of which is, of course, this ghoul, Victoria Nuland. America's biggest warmonger, Victoria Nuland, met with the military junta in Niger and threatened them. She told CNN that she met with General Musa Salawu Barmu, the self proclaimed chief of defense, and three colonels supporting him for more than 2 hours for, quote, extremely frank and at times quite difficult conversations. She asked to meet the French poodle, former president. He was not allowed because he was detained. Hang in there, Niger. The word is with you. They already broke their noses in Afghanistan. The other one is also another commentary about this case, which is, I believe, is important. Also about Victoria Nuland. The heart of darkness visits Africa. So the in inimitable Victoria the Hutt paid a visit to Niger. Bear in mind that an unknown number of Wagner forces are already there and are at least advising the leaders of the military coup. Russia is unquestionably deeply involved in what is happening at this moment in Western Sahel. Significantly, and no doubt to her great outrage and humiliation, Nuland was denied an audience with the junta leader, General Abdelrahman Tiani. Nevertheless, Nuland solemnly adjured the Nigerians to not ally themselves with the Russians. Indeed, this appears to have been her primary message. The Nigerians acknowledged her transparent threats, then showed her the door and advised her to not let it hit her in the ass on the way out. As recently as 70 hours ago, relatively few believed these developments in Africa were very meaningful in the bigger geopolitical picture. I mean, I believed it's a big issue. That's why I started talking about it. I submit, as I did 3 days ago, that this could very well become quite meaningful. In fact, from all indications, it already has. It has been said that Putin, rather than responding directly to a provocation from the West, is often inclined to escalate in parallel. These developments in Africa appear to me to constitute a parallel escalation of what I have long asserted to be the early stages of an already commenced Third World War. Between the idea and the reality, between the motion and the act, falls the shadow. To be honest with you, this woman looks like really evil in the eyes. If you look at her, it's like I just tweeted today and I said, Africans, this woman is not your friend. And I truly mean it. This woman's hands are soaked with blood, lots of blood. If the Ukrainians knew what this woman did to them in 2014 by turning the country against Russia through this violent coup that happened in 2014, which led now to the Russian invasion and the Russian offensive to Ukraine and the killing of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, if the Ukrainians knew what this woman did to their country, they would spit on her face. They would consider her persona non grata. But we have someone like Zelensky in power and his mafia and gang there who would never tell the Ukrainians the truth about this woman. This woman is a neocon imperialist warmonger. She's serving the empire in the best way possible. She's just like a copy of Hillary Clinton. She's like a copy of what was her name? Madeleine Albright. All these female women diplomats who they told us if a woman comes to a position of power, we will not see wars. And unfortunately, they always make sure to bring these ghouls and warmongers and psychopaths to position of power, whether they are males or females, whether they are men or women, in order to serve the establishment, the empire in the US, which has inflicted a very heavy pain to the rest of the world. And that's why we can see there is increasing sympathy in the African continent, in the Middle East, with Russia and not with the United States. But still, we have people like this guy. Of course, these people mostly they live in the West, and as I mentioned, they see the sunshine from the butthole of the oppressor. And I will make this very clear. I live in Germany. I love Germany. I love the German people. I dislike the foreign policy of Germany. I would never do anything that harms the Germany as a country. In the contrary, I would do everything that keep this country safe. But when the politicians are pursuing certain policies that can harm their own people, and if I criticize that, that doesn't mean that I hate the country, but I despise and dislike the policies that harm the interests of the German people and all the residents of Germany here. And this is my opinion about it. So, what do you think, guys, may happen in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and other African countries? Do you think the ECOWAS will invade these countries? Do you think the other countries will form an alliance against the ECOWAS? Will France intervene directly? Will the United States dare to intervene directly? What will the Wagners do in this regard? Please comment and let me know what are your opinions, because tomorrow, as I mentioned, I'm going to host a journalist to speak about this case, to discuss it together. So I'm going to also learn from you. Probably you have some questions I can pose to them. So let me know, guys, your opinions in the comment below. But till then, this is all for today. Just before I end up, like after every video, I have to do just this 1 minute monologue. I have become an affiliate marketer for vitamin D company, and I'm selling it's on my YouTube channel. You don't pay any commission for it. The trademark called Sunfluencer, and it's a friend of mine on Twitter who is the CEO, and he's selling it online. If you're from the United States and you want to buy vitamin D3 K2, which is very, by the way, important for the proper functioning of your immune system, and remember, this is a supplement. It doesn't replace the sunshine, it doesn't replace your practice, it doesn't replace your diet and everything, but it's a supplement. It complements your diet, and I take it always. I take 20,000 units every 4 days or 5 days maximum, and it is very important, especially if you live in somewhere like Berlin, which is like it's still raining. We're in the mid-August and we're still having storms and rains. Global warming, right? Anyways, if you're interested in buying vitamin D3K2 in the United States, I will put the link in the description below and also pinned in the first comment. If you're in Germany, I will put you the link of what I use here. Maybe also interested in that. Nothing is compulsory, guys. No need to fight about it. Just if you want and you're already probably buying and using this supplement, you can buy it from this company, which also helps me to generate some further income for the future of this channel. So I've been your host, Almassian of Syriana Analysis. If you're new, please subscribe and share this video with your friends. Like, it's free, guys, if you want to just like this video. And we will see you tomorrow, inshallah. Ciao.